No, we're no closer whatsoever. The reality is, I'm afraid, I'm sorry to say this, but there is no peace process. And the reason for that is because ultimately, to put it really bluntly, really grossly, the Russians want to take Ukraine and the Ukrainians want to live. And the logic of war is that must continue until one side or the other is exhausted. I'm not saying that has to be the Russian or the Ukrainian.
That single sentence changes everything, because this isn't speculation. It's not rhetoric. It's a brutal summary of reality. If this is true, then peace talks are nothing more than theatre, and what comes next is far darker than anyone wants to admit.
Could this be what Donald Trump has been promising us for so long, the final stretch of this very long 4-year war, ending in some kind of ceasefire and possibly even a peace? But then, judging from what Vladimir Putin said in his marathon 4-hour pre-Christmas press conference yesterday, he's not about to give up anything at all. Let's speak to James Nixie, Russian affairs analyst, who's recently stepped down as director of the Russia-Eurasia program at Chatham House. James, good morning to you.
Good morning, Matt.
So let's just talk about the latest developments in these peace talks then. Trump forever hopeful that, this thing will be done by Christmas, although, of course, he also said it would be done in 24 hours with him getting the White House back. Are we any closer to a resolution, do you think?
For 4 years, the world has been fed hope, deadlines, predictions, promises that the war is almost over. But hope is cheap in wartime, and sometimes it's dangerously misleading.
Would rescind their desire to join NATO, so they're willing to give in certain areas, but they're not willing to give in each and every area. Not if you think back to that 28-point plan developed by the Russians but sold by the Americans just 3 weeks ago, then even that was not actually acceptable to the Russians, it would appear, and that certainly wasn't acceptable to the Ukrainians or the Europeans, of course.
So are you saying that even if the Ukrainians were to say goodbye to the 25% or so of territory that has been occupied by the Russians in the eastern region known as Donbass, even if they were to say goodbye to all that, Russia would still not be prepared to settle because they want to subjugate the whole country?
That is exactly what I'm saying, and more than that, because Russia asked for us to address the so-called root causes. And what he means by that, what the code for that, is that the West is constantly interfering.
This is where the illusion of negotiation collapses. When demands stretch beyond Ukraine itself, when they reach into Europe's past and NATO existence, compromise stops being possible. What remains is confrontation.
In what Russia says is its rightful backyard, its rightful sphere of influence. And until that very sort of maximalist, that very large demand is acceded to by the West. But the Russians believe this is a proxy war with the West, that Ukraine is simply the theatre. They might be right on that, by the way. And so, again, there is simply, no matter how much the Americans try to force it, no matter how much they give it, if they give in to the Ukrainians on the one side.
Once a war is framed as a battle against the entire West, retreat becomes unthinkable. At that point, the conflict is no longer about land. It becomes about identity, power, and rewriting the world order.
So no, apparently, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the Russian economy is coming under some strain with the amount of money that it's had to pay out to its soldiers to carry on fighting, because they're not all doing it out of the goodness of their heart.
Right.
So is money the deciding factor in this conflict? Who runs out first is prepared to sue for peace?
That is reasonable. It's just that neither are at the end of their tether yet. So, neither side is particularly healthy at the moment. The Ukrainians are certainly worn out, tired. There are internal problems with troop morale. They've been hacking away at this for the last 3.5 years now, and so I'm certainly, much as we might want.
Many believe wars end when money runs out, but history tells a different story. When ideology takes over, suffering becomes acceptable, exhaustion becomes irrelevant, and endurance turns into strategy.
It's about Russia. Russia is resilient, but it's not impregnable, and it's certainly showing some signs of wear and tear, to say the very least. But I'm afraid Russia's got quite a bit more in it still to come.
So, I made a very optimistic prediction to myself, and luckily not to anyone else, but I'll share it with the listeners, that this thing might be over by spring. Is that ridiculously optimistic?
I'm afraid it is. I'm sorry to say. Look, it's an atrocity and a tragedy combined, and it would be great if it were to be over in the right way. Of course, it depends how it is over. Of course, there is a way of finishing this war, and that is capitulating to the Kremlin's demands overnight. But the Ukrainians know from the war crimes that we have seen committed in Bucha and other places that will mean their effective extermination. Putin simply doesn't believe that Ukraine is a real country, and he wishes to subsume it in one way or another.
This is where politics ends and survival begins, because for some nations, surrender doesn't mean peace. It means erasure. And when that's the alternative, fighting becomes inevitable.
Because they will continue fighting. As of right now, there is not a single power in the world that could say, we will stop Putin, and so you can trust their word. So we are not trusting, and though it is very hard. Well, yesterday I only had electricity for, I think, 4 hours a day, same as many people in Ukraine. Last week, millions of people didn't have electricity for 5 days straight. But again, what is our alternative? An alternative is much worse, because to be killed, raped, and to see how everything you worked for and fought for will be destroyed is...
The war is no longer distant or abstract. It's felt in darkness, in silence, in homes without electricity. Every night brings the same question: will tomorrow...
Southern city of Odessa. And I wonder whether the war now is felt more in the great cities of Ukraine than it was at the beginning of it. I mean, not right at the beginning when Russian troops were in Kyiv and then repelled, of course, but in the first year of the war. Is it worse now than it was then?
It's different because by this time, Putin has destroyed the majority of our energy infrastructure. So no matter where in Ukraine you are right now, you can feel the war. And their nightly attacks, they continue in different cities. And when you go to bed in the evening, you don't know if you're a target this night. So right now, Russia seems to have a different strategy. They are trying to isolate specific regions in Odessa from Ukraine all in all. And
destroying bridges and roads isn't just military strategy, it's psychological warfare. The goal isn't only to defeat an army, but to paralyze an entire society.
It is extremely upsetting that by the words everybody is supporting us, but when it comes to making the decision to punish an aggressor, to do the thing that is just, fair, logical, and I think people of European Union will appreciate it, then for some reason it's not done.
Okay. Can you understand that some people are reluctant, taxpayers and governments, to give money to Ukraine when you've had a whopping corruption scandal at the heart of power, which has led to the resignation or the sacking of Andrei Yermak, Zelensky's chief of staff, his most important advisor?
Yeah, I totally understand that. And I'm as shocked and as upset as you are, even more, because this is our country and we were asking our partners, and this was happening behind the closed doors. We just hope that anti-corruption organs will finish what they have started. And I think all pro-European, pro-Ukrainian forces right now are taking it as a personal matter to make sure that this will get to court and that people will be punished, because this is beyond darkness, this is beyond absurd, and this is beyond painful.
Wars aren't lost only on the battlefield. They're lost when trust erodes, when allies hesitate, and when internal fractures weaken resistance from within.
And ultimately, what motivates Vladimir Putin? Is it, the parchment documents that he uncovered in the Kremlin during COVID about the resurrection of the Russian Empire?
Yeah. So, I mean, as far as the Americans are concerned, obviously this is a very outlier administration, and it does seem as though Donald Trump looks upon Vladimir Putin as a kind of a kindred spirit, a fellow leader of a great power, and that great nations, great powers, so-called, should do business together, and the little nations, such as Ukraine, of course it's not little, you don't matter and shouldn't be making these decisions. So I think there's an undercurrent of feeling. I know that Trump does flip-flop a little bit here and there, but the undertone is very much that he wants to get this done for Russians. As far as Vladimir Putin is concerned, then I think it's pretty simple that he himself is a great power nationalist, an ultra-conservative fanatic who believes that Russia should extend to wherever there are, as he sees it, ethnic Russians, and he believes that Ukrainians are Russians. Of course, they're not, and is willing, and he needs an empire to be that kind of place. So Putin, yes, of course, he's motivated by money. We know that he is corrupt. We know he has amassed a tremendous amount.
In the end, the real question isn't how this war ends, it's whether it can end at all. When one side fights to restore an empire and the other fights simply to exist, there is no middle ground. What do you think? Share your thoughts in the comments. If this analysis helped you understand the stakes, like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. More unfiltered analysis right here.